I'm Christopher Conway. Thank you for joining a conversation with Jane Schroeder and Will Basel of Lenox Advisors. This conversation is brought to you by the Dr. Susan Love Foundation Visionary Circle. The Visionary Circle was created in 2015 to recognize donors who have included the foundation in their estate and financial planning, and in the past 2 years alone has contributed more than $1 million to help the foundation pursue its mission to end breast cancer once and for all. And a disclaimer, before I introduce Jane and Will, this webinar is not intended to provide investment or legal advice, but instead to inspire and empower you to plan your financial future. Now it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce Jane and Will.
Well, great, Christopher. It's a great pleasure to be able to speak with you all today. As you guys will probably discover by attending these kinds of Zoom meetings over time and people having their picture up, one can argue there's never going to be anybody as having good looking glasses, just as Christopher Clinton Conway does.
Thank you.
But absolutely. I mean, truly, it's a privilege and an honor. I felt very flattered when Christopher has given us the opportunity to come speak to the Dr. Susan Love Foundation and just share a little bit about some of the work that we do and how we do it. The firm Lenox Advisors is a nationwide firm. Back in the 90s, we founded and did a major breakthrough back in the day doing executive carve-out benefits planning for key employees. And oftentimes what companies would do during those days is retain us to come talk to their employees primarily about their disability income insurance as they take a look at how people are compensated, how that money is ultimately protected in case there's an illness. And we've started sort of back in the day in the financial services industry, but have since also expanded into other platforms like real estate and entertainment, pharmaceutical, and the medical space, right? And again, what we do in those one-on-one conversations is really sit down with each individual employee and kind of go through that discovery meeting, right, with them face-to-face of what is income, what does it really mean to them, how it really formulates their lifestyle, their ability to save, send their kids through school, sort of build up these fantastic goals that people have in mind, right? And kind of what can come in the way. And that sort of brings to the table a very unique aspect in terms of everybody's own emotions and feelings, right, about money and how it's all attached to one another. But here too, it helps to kind of bring clarity to people, right, and hear these stories out. And listen, there's a number of relationship managers that we have here at Lenox Advisors to help really with these scenarios. But today we also have the distinct pleasure of introducing Jane Schroeder, who also had, a lot of these kinds of conversations with their clients, and unfortunately also had some personal experiences, in particular with breast cancer, to sort of share that with us. I truly want to give you the opportunity and pleasure to introduce Jane Schroeder from Lenox.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Christopher. And thank you, Dr. Susan Love Foundation. I'm thrilled to be here. I am a breast cancer survivor, and I have been cancer-free, I'm proud to say, for the last 3.5 years. I learned so much during my journey with cancer, and my hope is that today our sharing will inspire you to make changes that empower you and encourage you. In preparing for this webinar, I ended up reaching out to some very dear friends that are the true warriors that are dealing with breast cancer right now, and they are my heroes, and their courage and the way that they've gone through this battle has been so inspiring. I wanted to ask them what were some of the key takeaways that they received while going through this journey of breast cancer. And what they said today was really profound. So I'd like to take a couple of minutes and quote them. The first one is, "The fear of the unknown in the journey was the most challenging part of my breast cancer experience. However, once I had the information that I needed to determine my path, everything seemed more manageable. I learned that information is power." The next one is, "I changed my attitude about life during my breast cancer experience. I found hope and possibilities in all aspects of my life. I faced things that were hard and challenging, and that gave me tremendous confidence and strength that I didn't even know I had. And the last one, I learned how powerful it was to have the connection with your team of doctors and specialists, a team that you and your loved ones all together handpicked, a team that you trust with your life, and a team that all works together, all for the common goal of taking amazing care of you. And I share these quotes today because they reminded me of the time in my life where I needed to feel powerful and strong and inspired. And these are courageous women. And today we are talking about navigating your financial future. But the interesting thing is that the above quotes hold true in dealing with cancer and for dealing with navigating every element in your life. Information is power. A great attitude when times are challenging defines the quality of your life. Pick an amazing team who you trust and who work together to all take care of you and your family. And today, in this short time that we have together, my wish for all of you is that these quotes become words of wisdom that we all live by in every element of our life. So let's get started with the first slide. And this talks about, I like this slide because it really talks about the mountains that we climb through life and when we're on this journey. And you take a look at the beginning part and the foundational part. And these are all the things that we're going to talk about today. Retirement being the top of the mountain. But once retirement is here, there are other things to start thinking about. And we'll discuss all of those today. So let's go to the next slide. And let's get started. All right. So building a cash cushion for your future is critical. And I think we've all experienced that right now with COVID. And we used to say, make sure that you had 6 months of reserves put away for your expenses. But now with COVID, I think we've moved that from 6 to 8 months. And I know emergency reserves are hard to accomplish sometimes, but the importance of this slide is really not about whether or not you've accomplished that yet, but about inspiring you to accomplish it and to start putting money away because life is uncertain. And when it's uncertain, to have that emergency fund it does give you that empowerment, and it does make it so that you don't have to worry as much. So let's go to the next slide. All right, the slide that we all worry about, avoid the debt trap. So the most important thing about debt, I think, is credit card debt. It can become really overwhelming very quickly. And I'm gonna share a story about my daughter, who was in her mid to late 20s, and she ended up having some health issues. And so her debt ended up a little higher because of that. But she also really enjoyed Amazon and could do quick little purchases there, and they all ended up adding up. And I share this story because she kept this secret where she didn't tell anyone what was really going on. And she would never talk about finances, did not want to have anyone ask any questions, would not share anything. And finally, a couple of years ago, she came to me and said, I've accumulated $20,000 of debt. And this was a girl in her 20s, in mid to late 20s, but all the same. And she said, I don't know how it happened, but it's happened and I don't know what to do. So the fact that we had that moment, we were able to sit down and go over her budget and make it so there were sacrifices, but the things that were most important to her, she could still do. And we were able to tackle that through strategy and from just facing her fear, we were able to accomplish the game plan and come up with a game plan that worked for her. And I am proud to say 2 years later, she is debt free. So that is a good story, and I think something that we can all probably really relate to. Let's go to the next slide. This is talking about employee benefits, and employee benefits are really valuable. And oftentimes we find that people end up, open enrollment typically is in the fall or towards the end of the year, and we all start getting so busy during that time period. And a lot of times we rush through it. And what I'd really like to encourage all of you today is don't rush through it. If you don't understand everything that's being offered to you, bring someone in that does, someone that can support you, someone that can explain to you exactly what the benefits are. But the benefits that are made available, these HR teams are so sophisticated now, and they've done such amazing jobs with trying to offer amazing benefits to executives and to employees alike. So I encourage you, take some time with it. Take a look at what's being offered. Take a look at the 401k plans. Take a look at the sponsored life insurance. If you've had cancer in any way, it's very possible that this would be an avenue where you could get life insurance and disability, and certainly the health benefits. So this is something that is really important, I think is always rushed through, and I encourage you to not rush through it and to really focus on it. If you have the option of having supplemental benefits, take them. Make sure that you take a look, you talk to whoever is presenting the supplemental benefits, and make sure that before you say no, you understand exactly what's being made available to you. Next slide. So protecting yourself and your dependents. And these are 3 types of insurances that are really important. Sometimes people just don't like talking about them, but they are the foundation of your life, and they're very important. So we're going to talk in a little more depth about these 3 different types of insurance so that you have a clear understanding of what they are and how they can help you. Let's go to the next slide. This is something that we have, and this is a brochure that we offer our clients at Lenox. And this is a policy review summary. And so frequently people have insurance and then they forget about it. And it's really important that you take a look at your insurance portfolio and you look at it on a regular basis, that you do an audit, and that you make sure as your life changes and your needs change, you make sure that your insurance portfolio is matching that. And this will be available to you. You'll have access to these brochures on the website. So next slide, please. So life insurance. Life insurance is there, obviously, if something were to happen and you passed away, and this would be money that would go to your family and your loved ones. I like to think of life insurance as seasons. So the first season of life insurance is really when you're young and you're starting a life, you're starting a family, and you end up wanting to make sure if something were to happen to either one of you, that the family's protected. And the one thing that I do find about this phase is frequently people end up getting the same amount of coverage that their neighbor had or that their best friend had. And that's one thing that I'd really encourage you to not do. Make sure that the life insurance matches what you want to accomplish, and make sure you really think about that so that if something were to happen, the things that are important to you, the things that matter, whether or not it's paying a home off, the mortgage of a home, or whether or not it's you want to make sure that your children have an education, or you have a monthly income, those are all things that are personal and change and vary with different people. The next season is a season that's often overlooked. And that season is your kids are grown, you've launched your children, and now it's just you and your partner. And in that season, where we look at life insurance, a lot of people think, I don't need it after the kids are grown. But the reality is at that season, you need it because it's protecting, it becomes kind of a couple thing at that point where you're protecting, if both of you work, you're protecting the retirement plan, because if something were to happen prematurely, that partner would never make any additional money. And therefore, it's really important that you have that life insurance in there to fill in that gap. My father ended up diagnosed at 53 with a rare neurological disease. He was 56, my mother was 53, and that is the prime time. That's game time for retirement. And he couldn't work after that, after age 56. And my mom was very young and she's in her 80s now. But fortunately, he had life insurance that filled that gap of those lost wages. So that's very important. The last season is my favorite, and it's a season that's often forgotten. And that is you're in your retirement years. And the reason why this is so important to me is because I've seen what a difference it can make. So where would you need life insurance at that point in your life? First of all, if something happened and one spouse or partner passed away and you're getting Social Security on the lower, the survivor would get the higher benefit, but the lower benefit would drop off. So that leaves a gap in income. And then we have the situations where people want to spend all of their money, but they want their kids to have something. So life insurance is utilized there. And also we see it with life insurance with a long-term care rider, which becomes a really valuable tool where you can pay off your life insurance policy and have this long-term care pool and a death benefit pool and have the option to utilize both. But my favorite part of this season is when you can utilize life insurance to become an ordinary donor in your favorite charity to an extraordinary donor. And I think about one of my favorite clients. When she was in her 70s, she came from a family where they were very, very large philanthropists, and they had, in the Midwest, they had buildings at colleges named after them, and they were just really committed to philanthropy. And with life insurance, she couldn't be as committed as her family was, but she wanted to. So she was able to utilize life insurance, and she had the charities. She chose 3 of her favorite charities. She had each of those charities were the beneficiary, was the owner of the policy and the beneficiary. And she ended up gifting the charity the money for the insurance premiums. And in her 70s and probably into her mid 80s, it was just something she did. But let me tell you, when she hit her mid 80s and life started slowing down, this became hugely important to her. And she died in her mid 90s, but she became this extraordinary donor for 3 different philanthropies. And every time I went to see her, she was so excited to share a note that she'd received from them, a little gift that she'd received from them, pictures from the gala. And this allowed her to be extraordinary. And it was such a gift for her. So I want to make sure you're aware that that's even available. Let's go to the next slide. And this is just something you'll have access to. So we're not going to really hit on this. But if you have different questions about life insurance, this really goes through all of a lot of the questions. So you'll have access to that on the website. Let's go to the next slide. And this is disability insurance. Now, disability insurance is probably one of the most overlooked, yet one of the most important insurances out there. And what disability insurance does is it replaces your income should you become sick or hurt. Frequently, it's offered through work, but frequently, depending on your situation, it may not fully cover you, but it might fully cover you. And it's certainly something to look at. There are a lot of elements about disability insurance that are really important. It's important that you're working with someone that understands that so that they can help you. But I'll tell you with my personal, I'll share another personal story. My cousin, who was 51 at the time, same age as me at that time, she was diagnosed with brain cancer. Very unexpected. She was newly divorced and had 2 children, both in college. So it was a really scary experience. And she ended up, her biggest challenge, she had absolutely no idea what she had with disability insurance through work. She thought she might have something, but she had no idea. And to see the panic of her daughter, who was 21 at the time, trying to process the fact that what are we going to do if she doesn't have any money coming in and she's so sick? What are we going to do? How are we going to manage this? We finally found out that her company did cover her, but they paid for the disability insurance, and as a result, it was taxable to her. So she had a 40 to 50% loss of income during the most challenging time of her life. And her biggest concern while fighting for her life was, how was she going to pay her mortgage? How was she going to pay her bills? And that to me, that hit me so hard, because that is a time where every ounce of her energy needed to go into her recovery and her getting better. And the fact that she had to worry so much about money was something that my hope is that no one would have to do that. Contrary, the next year I ended up having my breast cancer, and because of the planning that I had done, I didn't have to worry about the money part of life. I could spend every ounce of energy on getting better in my recovery, and that was such a huge gift. So I might be on a one-woman mission, but I want to make sure that no one ever finds out about their disability insurance when they're in a hospital bed. That's just not right. So take a look at what you have and what's made available to you. It's so important. Let's go to the next slide. This is a piece that we utilize frequently when we do supplemental benefits for different companies. And what's nice about this is that it really takes the money that you're earning, and it takes your age, and it shows what if you became disabled or hurt, sick or hurt. It shows how much money your family would lose. So take a look at this chart. I urge you to look at it on the website, because it's really valuable and very helpful. Let's go to the next slide. Long-term care. Long-term care is something that we hear an awful lot about, but one thing I can tell you about long-term care is there are many options that are available now that really weren't available or popular or well received, I guess we should say. But in the last 5 years, that's changed. And there are a lot of things that are available to families to protect in the event of a long-term care need. And really what a long-term care need is if, and it can be at any age. We frequently see it in the elderly, where it can be any kind of cognitive issue, or it can be just needing standby assistance for activities of daily living. And I find that this is such a huge gift for the children, because it makes it so that they know that their loved ones are taken care of. So long-term care is something that's really important for every financial plan. Let's go to the next slide. And this goes through the different costs of care. And I find, being in Southern California, I find that these numbers are a little lower than what people typically see. But but it gives you an idea and it gives you a gauge of the different areas and the different cost. And once again, this is reflective of nursing home cost in a semi-private room. So let's go, this will be available to you as well on the website. Let's go to the next slide. Estate planning. Frequently I hear people say, oh, I don't want to do this. I have no idea who I want to be the guardian of our children, and my spouse and I just argue over it, so we're just not going to do it. And I will tell you, it's so important to have your estate plan looked at, and whether or not it's a will, whether or not it's a living trust. There are benefits for each, but find an estate planning attorney that you feel comfortable with, and someone that can really guide you properly. But to make sure that the people that you care most about are the recipients of your overall estate. That's important. And also to have a medical durable power of attorney and a financial power of attorney to make sure that the people making decisions, if you can't, are people that you want to be making those decisions. So it's really an important element of a plan, and finding someone that can be a good teammate who can work with your other advisors is really important. So I would interview people if you don't have an estate planning attorney, and make sure that you find someone that will be around for a long time and someone that you really treasure. Next slide. This is a piece that we have through Lenox, and what we found is when something happens and someone passes, understanding what to do and how to do it is really hard. And so this is a piece that helps your dependents. God forbid you ever needed anything. It really is a good roadmap. So once again, this will be made available to you as well. Next slide. And Will, you're on.
All right, thank you. Great topics, great info advice. Well, listen, why invest? Investing allows you to harness the power of growth, right, over the course of your life. When you have money that isn't accruing any kind of interest, meaning you keep your cash in the proverbial mattress, well, the value of your money is actually going down because it doesn't keep up with the rate of inflation or the cost of living. Right. The simple way to see the effects of inflation is really to look at postage stamps, right, and the bills that you attach to them. Like back in 1983, it will cost you 20 cents to mail in your monthly payments. And today, the forever stamp is 55 cents, right? The increase in postage alone is 175%. And then you add to that how much more you're paying to the utility companies, right? Gas, electric, water, et cetera. And even just think about the things we didn't have any payments to, like digital subscriptions that are now up and coming. And what are these costs ultimately going to look like in 10, 15, 20 years? Likely more than they are today. So you have to deposit, you have to invest your money just even to break even, right? Let's say you invested the money instead of in the proverbial mattress back in the 80s into the largest 500 companies made up in the New York Stock Exchange, or let's call it the S&P 500, $1,000 invested back then would have amounted to $25,000 today, right? And so think about the time horizon that you have to keep in mind when you go about investment strategies altogether, right? The next slide, please. And you have to be mindful when you invest in the markets, you got to be prepared for volatility and price fluctuations, right? On the screen, what you see is kind of looking like the periodic table of elements, but we like to call it the periodic table of investments. And the colors on this chart depict the different investment index, and there's a number of different ones out there. But there's two key elements that we can take away from this graph here. First of all, not all investment classes perform the same way. And what's great one year can be bad the next, right? Just And then the second piece is just because your index performed poorly one year doesn't mean it won't recover, right? Looking at this chart in particular, we highlighted 3 years, 2007, 2008, and 2009. Well, in 2007 and the previous 4 years, emerging market, the index of that in color orange, had the best top performing index return over that time horizon, right? Now look, in 2008, and we all know what happened in 2008, the start of the Great Recession, the index dropped to last place, right? But then again, 1 year later, 2009, it's again in the #1 spot. So you have to be mindful about when to invest. Be sure that you have a little bit of a time horizon for at least 2-3 years out for you to sustain the volatility, because it is ultimately going to happen. And the better you are prepared, the better you can ultimately get returns out of the markets. Next slide, please. So here we have what we call asset location. And that's a strategy that really determines the proper account or the place of investments to get the most favorable tax treatment overall, right? It's not a replacement for asset allocation, but it adds to the overall after-tax rate of return, the money that you ultimately keep, right? So it helps to maximize certain tax efficiencies between really two distinct account qualification, as we like to call them, qualified accounts and taxable accounts. So qualified accounts are more of the sense of a retirement plan or college education program where you get certain tax beneficial treatments thereof. And ideally, we want to have less tax efficient vehicles like taxable bonds or hedge funds should ideally be owned in those tax deferred accounts, right? And in the same sense, we would want to have things that have more efficiency in regular tradable accounts, taxable accounts, because it gives you the opportunity to do certain things like tax loss harvesting or capture lower capital gains or dividend type tax treatments. So again, those we would want to see in a taxable account, and being strategic and mindful about how these two really interplay can really add some good, healthy rate of return into your portfolio, and also some peace of mind, just knowing that money that you work probably hard to accumulate is equally working hard for you to be kept and grown considerably. Next slide, please. Well, here it's really talking about asset management in retirement planning, right? Or any other major goals that you are now starting to be on the receiving end. Because again, once you grow money, it's all about the allocation. You can tweak the efficiency around it. When you start retiring, there's all kinds of mindful things you have to be concerned about of how money is ultimately coming to you in a number of different buckets is really how we kind of trying to approach these things, as it gives you more flexibility and options to designate certain accounts, money, for example, that you need right now in retirement, meaning month to month, really, you would want to have set up with certain type of investments that you can rely on, right? Of course, there used to be pensions that would provide us that kind of an income stream on a month-to-month basis. Now it's predominantly Social Security benefits for retirement. And if you feel like that may not be enough for you to just feel comfortable about, you would want to replicate a guaranteed income stream such as that for yourself and the family. And then, because you got to be mindful that you also need money for later, or money much later, right? Because let's say you start to retire in your 60s, you have 20, 30 more years to go. So you don't want to have the long-term money invest the same way as your short-term money. Next slide, please. The other big component that clients ask us to do some planning around, because it's a major expense, is college education. And if you consider that the average out-of-state tuition is $37,000 and you multiply that times 4 years, you'll realize that educating your children is a hefty expenditure. And the sooner you can start to invest, the earlier you start, the better it is. And everybody's a little bit different, but there's one common approach that I think you'll find some value in. On the next slide, please. right? Many of us simply need a place to start, and this is where I would like to call it the rule of thirds. That's the approach we like to give, where you start to get started with money from the past, money that you've saved up over the years while your kids were growing. Bundle that with the present money that you're going to have for college that predominantly comes out of current income, right? And potentially future money that may not be sufficient, you have to ultimately borrow through student loans, right? Just breaking it down to having sort of this three-legged approach to an education savings goal helps people to really get their footing going. Next slide, please. Again, if past savings or current income is truly not enough and you need to finance your student loans or potentially even refinance loans, we started collaborating with this very interesting company called Common Bond, which was founded back in 2012 by a Wharton MBA student, David Klein, who was himself burdened with a ton of student loans and wanted to find a way to make better sense of it. Couldn't really find anything and developed this company to what it is today. You can see on the slide, kind of made their mark. The reason why we like them in particular is not just their award-winning service, but they also offer like deferment or forbearance, right, for a disability or a death, where they can make some arrangements for these things to be alleviated. And the other cool thing that they do is a little bit of an element of social promise, right? Where they, if you would finance their loans with this company, they would sponsor the education of a child in need, and that's a cool feature. There's a lot of clients that we helped go through that process. One I think that stood out recently is a client who just became an attending physician, right? And after 7 long years as a resident and fellow, during that time, he went on an income-driven repayment plan. And due to his low income, right, his loan negatively amortized, meaning the principal grew substantially more than was loaned. So with no assets, right, residency, fellowship, the doctor has now a net worth of minus $404,000. But he has great income. And now he works for a private practice in South Jersey, so public service loan forgiveness is not an option for him. Bottom line, his old interest rate was 7% at a 10-year fix. Now he's down to 5.68, and with that saves about $500 per month, or basically reduced about $60,000 off the loan. If you want to have some sort of a checkup on your student loans or considering any of that, there's the link here on this graph that shows a direction for you to actually get more educated about it and get discounted rates as well. I think ultimately it all boils down with knowing that there's a ton of resources out there. There's people that can really point you in the right direction. And it's sort of what Jane said earlier, is to build out a team of professionals. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to her to elaborate.
Next slide, please. And thank you, Will. You just teed up this next slide beautifully. When you have cancer, we go from possibly not having a team at all of doctors to help us. But then once you go through the journey, you develop this robust team of people that you trust and that matter and that care about you and want the best for you. And if you get anything out of this webinar today, the most important thing is that you take a look, even if it's hard, you take a look at your financial situation and you come up with a plan and you build a team just like you built that team of doctors, but you build a team with the following professionals. So with a financial advisor, an insurance advisor, an estate planning attorney, a CPA, a real estate advisor, and a family philanthropy advisor. And each of those team members together work for your behalf. And that's a powerful thing. And you want to always make sure that you've got a quarterback, someone who's going to quarterback everything for your family. But this is a huge piece. Build that team out. You deserve it. So at this point, I think we are done with our presentation, and we have a list of resources here that will be available to you. And any questions?
Thank you both so much. I actually learned quite a bit, and I'm already a client of Lenox Advisors.
Good.
So if anyone wants to ask a question, you can do that on Zoom in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And I'm glad to pose them to our panelists. But I wanted to ask one question, which is personal and professional. So Jane, when someone chooses to make a philanthropic gift with life insurance, how does that exactly work if the institution or organization owns the policy? So you're making a gift of the premiums every month or annually. How does that work exactly?
Well, typically how it works is that you have the charity as the owner and the beneficiary. So the premiums would come directly to the charity, and then the donor happens to make a donation in the same amount. And then you take that donation and you pay for the policy with that. And it makes it so that the donation is 100% tax deductible, as in a regular donation. And then the death benefit and the policy is owned by you. So if you guys needed to get to cash for some reason, there was cash value in the policy, you could get to that. But the death benefit would be a huge way to leverage a donation. And it's kind of an exciting opportunity for a family.
Well, and I'm no expert, goodness knows. That's why I look to folks like you and Will. But something that I share with folks that a lot of times I don't think they realize is that, and it doesn't apply, of course, to an institution or organization, but when you leave a policy, it's tax-free to the beneficiaries. That's true still, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a question from one of our participants. What advice would you give young people who maybe have very limited income but want to get started? What would be a good way to do that?
I think getting started. I'm going to let Will take most of this question, but I would say the most important thing is to look at your situation and to look at your budget and to figure out what's most important to you. And that exercise alone gets you to your goals and to your dreams. And I think that's just so important to just do it and find someone that can support you in that, and someone that can help you and help you make your dreams come true. And Will, do you have any input on that?
Well, yes, it really is a point to get started, right? And starting is really also understanding of just what can you do with money. You can save it, you can spend it, you can invest it, or donate it. That's it, right? Where do you want to make the biggest impact? Right? Are you kind of a saver or investor? Then pursue that route. Learn more about it. Find things online, right? Reach out to resources such as ourselves. The same could be said about, again, have you spent too much? Do you need to debt consolidation? And here too, plenty of resources, right? Do you want to give back in the community? Give back, right? You can, again, do it with money. You can also do it with time. I had the pleasure more than once to be with Christopher Clinton Conway at a fundraiser or two, and it's fun where you just do good things for the community, and at the same time you meet some interesting people.
I've had people, and going back to the first question, I've had young people that have donated a nominal amount, but a high death benefit. And they've done it. I have one client that's done this for 30 years. where he ends up donating to charity, and it's really nice that he's got that option to be able to give back.
The next question, I'm going to read it so that I don't lose anything in my interpretation. Does long-term care insurance only pay if you go into a care facility, or will payouts be made for modifying a home to accommodate long-term care?
It depends on how you structure the long-term care policy. So there are many different designs. I think that the best design, and the design that we use on a regular basis, is making sure that you have every option available to you. So one thing that we know for certain is that we don't know what our future holds. And as we age, and in particular, if you start getting either frail or you end up having a cognitive issue or whatever it might be that would make you need the long-term care, to be able to have options and to have your family have options. A lot of people want to stay at home. So being able to stay at home, being able to go into an assisted living facility or a nursing home, you can even, it will even reimburse you for adult daycare. So there's just a lot of options, and to get a robust policy that allows you to have those options, I think is really important for the family.
Well, thank you both. I'm a stickler for hitting the 45-minute mark, which we've done precisely. So thank you again, and thank to everyone who's listened in and given questions. It's been really an exciting discussion. And this webinar will be available on the Dr. Susan Love Research Foundation YouTube channel. We will also email the recording and links to the brochures that Jane and Will both referenced in their presentation. So thank you both again, and we'll talk very soon, I hope.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.